I'm not going to have my husband. I don't
Why
know.
you're not gonna have me?
Like, you don't always come to my stuff because of our big...
Y'all, this didn't just become a legal dispute. It looks like it spiraled into a live unraveling in front of everyone. Because for weeks, people brushed off the tension surrounding Warryn Campbell and Tina Campbell as background noise. Whispers that would disappear once everything slipped behind courtroom walls. But insiders say that's not how it played out. It looks like the real detonation allegedly went down inside that courtroom, and not in silence. Sources claim Warryn didn't just respond. He allegedly stepped in ready to reveal everything. Not rumors, not spin, proof. Personal messages. Audio recordings. After-hours conversations that, according to speculation, exposed a version of events the public never saw coming. Internet, pause. Because the second those alleged receipts were brought up, the entire energy of the case flipped. But here's where it twists. Instead of pushing back, Warryn allegedly flipped the narrative entirely, suggesting this wasn't just one person's misstep, but a concealed double reality. And that claim? It spread like wildfire. Now, the focus isn't just betrayal. It's about who was actually pulling the strings all along. Then comes the next shock. Because insiders say Teddy Campbell was there. And what he allegedly heard didn't just sting. It shattered him. He sat there. And nothing was the same after. Silence. And right when it feels like that was the breaking point, another escalation. Because Warryn allegedly suggested that what surfaced in court wasn't the full story. That there's more waiting. More layers. More moments still hidden from public view. Now think about this. If this is what's already surfaced, what's still being kept in the dark? Because right now, this doesn't feel like something closing out. It feels like something just beginning to crack open.
Stage in our relationship or where we are now, I just want to make sure that we're even intentional, even when we're working, just to kind of, just check.
It looks like this didn't stay online. It crossed into the courtroom and flipped everything on its head. Because for days, people assumed Warryn Campbell was just speaking, reacting, defending, dropping hints. But insiders now claim the real move wasn't digital. It allegedly happened inside that courtroom. No signal, no build-up. Just a full room, dense silence, and a moment that rewrote the entire narrative. Warryn rises, and instead of debating, he reportedly signals he's ready to reveal. Internet, freeze. Because what comes next, according to sources, isn't just words. It's an alleged drop of private material. Messages, voice recordings, pieces of conversations that, when lined up, hint at something far deeper than a single situation. Late-night exchanges, familiar tone, mentions of meetings that were never public, nothing officially verified, but enough to send a shockwave through the room. And that's where the first twist hits. Because the second something enters a courtroom, even as an allegation, it starts to feel more real than anything said online. Then the pressure builds. Instead of calling it a mistake, Warryn allegedly reframes the entire situation. This wasn't one moment, this was a double life. That line lands heavy, because now the story isn't just about if something happened. It's about how long it may have been unfolding. Two timelines, two versions of reality, one carefully crafted image, and suddenly, everything feels unstable. That's when the focus shifts to Tina Campbell. According to insiders, she doesn't respond right away. No visible reaction to settle the moment. Just silence.
We started doing the check-ins about 2008 because we didn't feel connected. If you don't connect, then...
And that silence, it starts getting decoded in real time. Some read it as control. Others call it calculated. Some take it as quiet confirmation. And once silence becomes part of the story, it starts amplifying every assumption around it. Then the second twist hits. Because sources claim Teddy Campbell was there. And the impact on him becomes its own storyline. No big speech. No public reaction. Just a visible shift. A reaction that, according to observers, looked like everything hit him at once. And that moment spreads just as fast as the alleged claims themselves. Because now this isn't just about two people. It's about something bigger starting to break. Then comes another escalation. Because Warryn Campbell allegedly doesn't stop at what's already been mentioned in court. He hints there's more. More messages. More context. More material that hasn't surfaced yet. And that changes the entire energy. Because now the audience isn't reacting to what's already come out.
In 2013, where infidelity rocked the core of the family. It's all on you, Teddy.
They're bracing for what might surface next. That's when curiosity turns into full investigation. People begin digging through past interviews. Old footage gets re-examined. Moments that once felt harmless start to look different under a new lens. And once that shift begins, the narrative starts expanding beyond control. Meanwhile, insiders claim the situation behind the scenes is getting more complicated. Legal pressure rising. Private conversations falling apart. Different sides preparing for outcomes that may not match at all. Because when multiple versions of story exist, resolution doesn't come easily. It fractures. And that fracture becomes visible. One comment going viral sums it up. This isn't just exposure, it's unraveling. Because unraveling doesn't hit all at once. It happens in layers. One claim leads to another. One reaction triggers more silence. One silence creates more questions. And the longer clarity stays out of reach, the deeper it pulls people in. But the most unsettling part? According to speculation, what's been referenced so far may not be the full picture, not the full timeline, not the full context, not the full story, which raises a question no one can answer yet. If this is what's already reached the courtroom, what's still waiting to come out?
Kid, I filtered everything through it. Yeah. Everything. So when loneliness showed up in my marriage, I went back to the old Ted.
Wow.
That's exactly how it happened.
It looks like the courtroom moment didn't resolve anything. It triggered a second phase. Because the second those alleged messages were brought up by Warryn Campbell, the attention shifted instantly from what was said to what else might exist. And that's where it starts getting complicated. According to insiders, the material referenced in court may only be a fraction of a much bigger timeline. Not one exchange, not a one-off situation, but a pattern. Late-night conversations, ongoing contact, moments that on their own seem harmless, but together start forming something more layered. Nothing confirmed, but enough to raise questions that aren't fading. That's the first twist. Because now the story isn't about a single allegation. It's about duration. How long was this allegedly happening? When did it begin? Who knew and at what point? And once those questions enter the conversation, everything starts getting re-examined. Old interviews resurface. Past interactions get reinterpreted. Even neutral moments begin to feel different, under the pressure of new assumptions. Meanwhile, Tina Campbell remains mostly silent publicly, and that silence keeps shaping the narrative in unpredictable ways. Some observers call it strategic, possibly guided by legal advice to avoid escalation. Others see hesitation. Others interpret it as an indirect response. That's the second twist. Because when one side introduces alleged material, and the other side doesn't immediately counter it, the balance of perception shifts, regardless of what's actually true. Then the situation escalates again. Because according to chatter surrounding the case, Warryn didn't just reference past conversations. He allegedly suggested there are additional materials that haven't surfaced yet. More texts, more voice notes, possibly more context tied to specific timelines. And once the idea of more enters the picture, the entire tone shifts. Now it's not about what's already known. It's about what could still be revealed. That anticipation drives everything forward. At the same time, Teddy Campbell remains in a position that continues pulling attention, already tied to legal tension, now potentially facing a narrative that evolves with every new claim. If one side presents a timeline, and the other side challenges it, the situation doesn't resolve. It expands. And expansion creates uncertainty. That's where engagement rises. Because uncertainty invites interpretation. Different audiences begin building different versions of what happened, based on fragments, reactions, and timing, rather than confirmed facts. That's how stories like this grow beyond their origin. Not through clarity, but through overlapping possibilities. Then another layer forms. Insiders suggest that behind the scenes, conversations are becoming more structured, less about public explanation, more about legal positioning. And that implies something important. If this is moving deeper into a legal framework, then future developments may not unfold online. They may come through filings, statements, or controlled releases of information. And that changes the rhythm completely. Because legal timelines don't match the speed of online reactions. They move slower, but with potentially greater impact. One observer summed it up like this. What we're seeing publicly might just be the surface. The real story could be forming somewhere else. And that idea shifts everything. Because if what's happening in court is only partially visible, then the public narrative may always feel incomplete. Which leads to a deeper question. If the current version of events is already this complex, what happens when the next layer finally surfaces? It looks like the situation has moved past exposure and into something harder to control. Because once the alleged courtroom references from Warryn Campbell began circulating, the narrative didn't stabilize. It fractured. Different clips, different interpretations, different timelines being built by the audience in real time. And that's where the third phase begins. Because now the story isn't being told by one side. It's being reconstructed by everyone watching. That's the first twist. Because once a narrative leaves the control of the people involved, it doesn't slow down, it multiplies. One moment gets clipped, another gets recontextualized, and suddenly, the same piece of information is being understood in completely different ways. Meanwhile, Tina Campbell is still not offering a clear, direct response that resets the narrative. And at this stage, that absence is becoming part of the story itself. Some interpret it as legal caution, some see it as strategic delay, others read it as an inability to respond without escalating things further. That's the second twist. Because silence, in a situation this visible, doesn't pause the conversation. It accelerates it. Then comes escalation. Because according to insiders, the possibility of additional material, messages, context, sequences has shifted how people are viewing everything that's already been mentioned. Now the audience isn't just reacting. They're anticipating. And anticipation is what keeps momentum alive. Every small detail becomes a potential clue. Every past interaction becomes something to revisit. Every gap becomes something to fill. That's when the story expands beyond the original event. At the same time, Teddy Campbell remains positioned in a way that continues to raise questions. Already involved in legal action, already connected to earlier claims. Now potentially facing a situation where multiple narratives intersect, none of them fully aligned. Because if one version of events suggests a timeline and another version challenges it, then resolution doesn't happen. Conflict does. And conflict sustains attention. That's the third twist. Because at this point, the situation isn't moving toward clarity. It's moving toward complexity. Insiders suggest that conversations behind the scenes are becoming more defined, focused less on public reaction and more on long-term outcomes. Legal positioning, reputation management, decisions that may not be visible immediately, but could shape what comes next. And that introduces a different kind of tension. Because when things shift from public reaction to private strategy, the next development often arrives without warning. No build-up. No preview, just impact. One observer captured the moment like this. This doesn't feel like it's ending. It feels like it's reorganizing. And that idea changes how everything is viewed. Because if the current phase is just a transition, then what comes next may not look like what came before. It may not be a live stream. It may not be a reaction. It could be something more controlled, more precise, and potentially more revealing. Which leads to the final question that's now driving the entire conversation. If what has already surfaced created this level of reaction, what happens when the next version of the story is presented with full context? It looks like this isn't reaching a conclusion. It's building towards something bigger. Because after that alleged courtroom moment involving Warryn Campbell, the narrative didn't settle. It escalated. Clips are still moving. Reactions are still shifting. And every new interpretation is stacking onto a story that no longer feels contained. Now, the focus isn't just on what was mentioned in court. It's on what might still be out there. Because if those alleged texts and conversations linked to Tina Campbell are only fragments of a wider timeline, then this situation isn't closing. It's expanding. That's where it becomes unpredictable. Meanwhile, Teddy Campbell remains at the center of a narrative that keeps shifting without a single confirmed version of events. And when no clear version exists, the audience starts filling in the gaps. That's exactly what's happening now. People aren't waiting anymore. They're connecting dots, revisiting past moments, building timelines that feel convincing, even if they're incomplete. And once that process begins, momentum takes over. Because momentum doesn't rely on certainty. It feeds on curiosity. And right now, curiosity is driving everything. One theory suggests this may not end with what's already been discussed. Another points to more context, more clarity. That hasn't surfaced yet. Nothing confirmed, but enough to keep attention locked in. Because at this stage, the story isn't just about what happened. It's about what could still happen. And that's the tension holding everything together. So the question isn't whether this is over. It's whether the next development changes everything again. Because if even one more piece comes out, this entire narrative could shift overnight.